Welcome to CyberMAYnia, cyber talks with the brightest minds in cybersecurity. Discussing risks, AI, emerging threats, workforce challenges, and more. Brought to you by Cyber Range Solutions. With your host, May Brooks.
Hello and welcome to another episode of CyberMAYnia. And with me today, a very special guest. He's an instructor. He's a cybersecurity professional. He's a Star Trek. Can I say a Star Trek geek? Is that okay?
I think it's fair, yeah.
I think it's fair enough.
We accept nerd or geek, yeah.
Exactly. That I think it's all of us. Larry Greenblatt, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, May.
Absolutely my pleasure. So as always, we start off this podcast with you telling us a little bit about you, your background, and what drove you into this crazy world we call cybersecurity.
I am an old guy from Philadelphia. Well, that's what my children tell me. I'm a musician growing up, and I love martial arts. I came from a kind of a martial arts family. My grandfather was an old boxer. I was 5-0, but I couldn't stand to listen to my mother complain, so I became a mailman. That's really true.
It sounds like my grandfather.
And I always loved technology. As you mentioned, I was a Star Trek fan. I grew up mesmerized by mostly Spock. I just love the idea of, why don't we just act logically and stop, getting too emotional about things. And as a musician, I was not making a great living. I was in my early 20s, and at a recording studio, a guy had a computer, and it was a Commodore 64, and then he had a magazine, and the magazine was Commodore 64, and it was like 1983, and I see this advertisement for like a flight simulator on a giant screen TV, and I want to do more. And I'm picturing I got my Enterprise, or maybe just a shuttlecraft I could run on with Commodore. And he said, hey, you should do what my brother Nicky did. He went in one of these Channel 29 jobs, learned to fix computers and something, got a job in like 8 months. And I was like, Nicky could do that.
I can do that.
He's as smart as Nicky, yeah. So I went to computer repair school in the background, and I took a job, and it was very early, 84, Novell networking was new, and I just jumped in. I had seen War Games, and I was like, oh yeah, networks. And we were already playing with modems, and I was already feeling like, man, dialing into all these bulletin boards and downloading the flight sim, and 300 baud. Yeah. Oh, it was great. You dialed in, you unplugged it and plugged it back in, and then you hoped at the end of the night that your software, you woke up the next morning, did it download? But then I just got into it with Novell, and packet analyzers came out, and Sniffer came out, and I just became this packet head. I just love sniffing stuff. And I was eventually started doing teaching class. I got a job at IBM, and in the evening you could take classes. And when I took a class, I joked around, I'm still an entertainer, and the guy pulls me aside. He goes, dude, you make a good teacher. So I was like, hey, we want to teach at night? And I was like, sure. I started doing Microsoft and Cisco classes. And then a guy in 2001, I think it was, showed me the CISSP. He was taking my Cisco CCNP boot camp, and he showed me the CISSP book he was using to study for CISSP, and told me, and I looked up CISSP, and I saw the code of ethics. And when I saw the code of ethics, I was like, this is like Jedi Knight stuff. This is for me. And that's really what did it. I was dedicated to that, to protect the common good. Yeah.
Amazing. And well, as you know, as an ISC2 board member, first of all, thank you for being a member for so long. And we are celebrating 30 years of CISSP this year.
That's right. And for 30 years, I try to tell people, you've had AI security in the curriculum. That's what cracks me up. So I don't mean to pick on people. I love that there's a lot of buzz around AI and risk management and stuff. And but the funny thing is, when people come to me and like, Larry, AI comes with risks.
We'll get there. Seriously, it has risks? Can't be. Yeah. So you know what? So let's start with that. we know that AI holds such great promises, and we talked about that before. I'm a huge advocate for AI. I think it can make our lives super easy, but it has so many risks. And I wanted your perspective. How do you propose society better mitigate those risks? Because I know that some organizations actually, I did hear it from some CISOs that said, "Oh, we just block AI. We block ChatGPT." Yeah, dude, that works
We
so
don't use
well.
the internet here. We don't
No, no,
allow
no.
email.
Let's just block the internet. I think that will work great. So no, and let's talk a little bit about your perspective.
Yeah, no, just as you say, it reminds me of zero trust. I was like, well, my martial arts coach, one of my great hobbies. He's been saying for the longest time that you got to lower your shields. You know, you can't if the Enterprise had their shields up, nobody can get on and off the ship. If the doors are locked at your grocery store, you can't get people to come in and buy from you. You know? So you have to open those doors. But AI, the big thing is alignment. You know, they're not necessarily understanding what I want. And I always say, we all know that when AI is, I hate the term AI, it's just automation. But when you get the automated phone call, the help desk, and it's press 1 for that, and you're like, but my call, my conversation, my needs are not in your 1 through 5. They're more complex than that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a basic alignment problem. And they're getting better. They're getting much better. I think the funny part, what the real challenge is that I like to say alignment's not a one-way street. It's not like we need the AIs to align with our values. Our values are not always great. You know, I want
Oh
to eat
yeah.
food that's not really good for me sometimes. You know, I don't always want to exercise, even though it's good for me. So I think humans have to bend a little bit, you know, and I like to use the telescope as the analogy. The telescope, when it first came out, you know, what Galileo saw didn't align with the church's values. Well,
Shit.
that
True.
doesn't mean you stop the telescope. And every ship's captain was like, I don't care what the Pope says. I can see the rocks further out and I can safely steer ships now. And it really enabled the shipping industry because we could see further out. Imagine steering by candlelight, you know, middle of
Yeah.
the night. It wasn't easy. And the worst thing for a ship is to hit these cliffs under the water, which is in Greek, rhizos, which is the root word for risk. The telescope was a
I
risk
didn't know.
management tool. Yeah, that's where we get it. That means cliffs
I,
underwater. My mother
I
was like
didn't know.
my mother was like the father for my big fat Greek wedding. She knew the even though she was Irish, she knew the Greek, the Latin, and then the Greek translation for everything. And risk comes from the Greek, Larry. Even govern, you know, or cyber, it's the same root word. It comes from
Yes.
the Greek. It's to steer the ship, and what you want to steer is away from the unforeseen dangers. You know. And I think AI is the same way. It can go out and give us more intelligence. The telescope didn't give us artificial intelligence. It was an
No.
artificial eye, right? It's an
It gave us
artificial eye,
additional data.
but it gave us real data. The data is
Yeah.
real. And that's what I say about AI. The data is real. When we call it artificial intelligence, it sounds like, wait a minute, this stuff tastes funny to me. This is man-made manufacturing. And it's real intelligence, but it's not always aligned.
And it's
And
not always accurate. And
And
I
no,
think that.
and it's probably not going to. This is my warning. I'm a big
Oh
Kurzweil fan.
yeah.
Kurzweil points out that we're not likely to get human level till 2029. And he sees no way to speed it up or slow it down. It's just a constant based on like Moore's law. So until 2029, I don't expect DALL-E is going to learn to spell everything I like right. You know, every time I
Yeah.
create a graphic, they're spelling it wrong. And I'm not expecting them to get better, but I don't think they're going to get it right till 2029.
But you know what? It's not even that. Today I've actually seen a post that someone said, I asked something, he asked something, I don't even remember what it was. I think it was on what year did Commander Keen come out, the game from, I think, 1985 or something like that. And then he asked it the same question in another way, and it got a different answer. And
Oh
it's
no,
like,
they
you can't
hallucinate.
trust
They
it. You
absolutely
can't.
hallucinate.
And
Yeah.
like, yeah, if you look it up on Google, you will also find 5 different dates, although there was one launch date. But the thing is, Google doesn't lie and ChatGPT doesn't lie. People lie. We give them that data. We are not accurate. And I think that one of the biggest challenges for every parent and definitely every educator out there is getting people to understand the difference between data that is out there and data that can be trusted. Even though it's on Wikipedia, it doesn't mean that it's trustworthy. So,
It's the age of fake news, they call it, but
oh,
whatever.
it's
Yeah, sure.
inaccurate. You know,
I,
when
but
COVID hit, I told my kids about the difference. We talked about many things during lockdown. One of them I told them about encyclopedias. And my son, who was then a first grader, told me, but mom, science progresses so quickly. If we count on an encyclopedia that was printed 2 years ago, we won't know the current things. You're absolutely right. And he was a first grader, but at least I'll know it was peer reviewed and those are actual facts. Because on Wikipedia, not necessarily,
well,
not always.
I think that's I wouldn't say that they're actual facts, but it's kind of like in any
Well,
development methodology. If it's waterfall, there's a better likelihood that you can trust it. And if we're sending probes like NASA probes, I want waterfall. You know, FDA type of
yeah,
thing should take that type of thing. But some
yes.
things are better, more
Mm,
agile. But the more you agile it, the less dependable it is, to be quite accurate. So you got to balance the level of precision you need for a given thing. But yeah,
absolutely. Well, you know what? You mentioned the code of ethics for IC, and I want to tap into that. There are so many ethical considerations when we're talking about AI. What do you think are the most critical ones when in developing or deploying AI technologies? Like, what are the ethical aspects?
I think, as I mentioned, until 2029, I don't expect them to be able to run on the moon. It's kind of like when we were first building whatever bicycles or airplanes, and they were jalopies, and you couldn't trust them. And so I think until 2029, they're going to take a lot of human oversight. And
Yeah.
so we see it all the time with people. He used ChatGPT to write a legal brief, and it made things up, and he presented it. And it's like, dude, you got to go over that. And you can't trust these things to be error free. I'm creating graphics that I don't care about. No one's going to die. They just might not laugh as hard. But if someone's going to
Yeah.
get hurt, you got to give it more things. So I think that's the thing. The attempt to put in guardrails, automatic guardrails, they're kind of really tricky to work because we've seen like a bunch of things over the last week with Gemini. Gemini's not Bard with a new name. It's a new woke version of Bard. and it,
Yes.
and it was the best attempt, but they overcompensated. So I
Well,
think the real answer is humans oversight. We can't let these things run on their own for now. I'm not leaving it unattended to wash my clothes or cook my food. I'm going to watch it. No, you can't put that in food. Oh, yeah, I always see you use bleach in the kitchen to clean the counter. Oh, sorry about that.
well, you didn't. You weren't specific enough. Yeah. So I agree. I agree. I think that there's so many considerations, and there is bias, and yes, it does lie to us, but it doesn't mean to lie. It
No, as
embellishes.
you said, it's because the information on the internet that it's using was fake news or whatever, and we have to understand that's always going to happen in a competitive environment. People are always, whenever there's competition, there's going to be a compromise of the integrity of information. When you collaborate, you want the other way. If Google is competing with Bing, they're not going to tell each other stuff. They're going to perform misinformation. But if whatever AWS is collaborating with Dropbox, then I need to know where those APIs, how they're being authenticated exactly.
Well, I agree, but I think that at the end of the day, the the current era is an era of content creators. People can write whatever they want and post it online. And
Yeah.
that's exactly the resources that Google is using and now AI is using. I can put my own blog and write whatever I want in it, including the fact that one day I'll do it. One day I will get I don't know what it's called, probably I don't know, maybe the Oxford Dictionary. I'm going to get them to acknowledge a word that I made up years ago. The
My
word
mother
for
always preferred American Heritage, but she's been gone for a few days.
Okay.
That was
Well,
her favorite.
I love small radishes. And in Hebrew, for example, small radishes have their own name. It's not radish, it's not called small radish, it has its own name in its own right.
Uh-huh.
And many years ago, about probably about 20 years ago, Friday night, we were all after a couple of beers, and we said we're going to make up a word for small radish in English, and we made up the word quelmish. Now, all our friends know it, and if we're making a salad, do you want quelmish in the salad? That's like,
That's so fun. Now,
yeah.
was there a root? Did you use quell from
No,
the Greek? That meant
no,
no. It's just a
no.
sound. You just decided to
We
pick a
just
sound.
like that sound. So one day I will invest enough time and energy in writing enough posts until quelmish will
It
become
becomes it's
the
part of the
actual word
vernacular.
for.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah. I think that will be like my legacy, giving small radishes their proper name, which is of course quelmish. Yeah. So I want to move on from AI, though we'll probably go back to that again. But you are known as the abundance mindset coach, which is not a usual mindset for people in technology, people in cybersecurity. And I want you to explain from your perspective, what does it mean to have an abundance mindset? What does it mean to you?
The simplest way I like to the analogy I like to use is and I just part of it is what we were just saying about competition versus collaboration. I say when if there's not enough water to go around and there's the mountain people and the valley people live by and only one of them there's only water for enough, they're going to compete and it's going to get deadly. You know, and but what else? What else can you do? It's kill or be killed or whatever. But if there is enough water, maybe there's advantages to not killing each other. And in the mountains, I like to say they grow the best strawberries and the valley people make the best peanuts. And if they just work together, they can build peanut butter and jelly. And I like to say that if you chart human history, we really have been moving from a time of scarcity. We go back and forth. We've had abundant times before, and it's not even history. History is very unreliable. Archaeology is probably better, but yeah, it's his word. We seem to be moving into a time. In fact, Sadhguru points out that in this generation, which is the first generation of people ever, globally to suffer more from obesity than from starvation.
Yeah.
So, as the shipping industry came about, we learned that we can do both, and so the Europeans they developed this wide area network technology. The Portuguese developed this sail that allowed you to move without the wind at your back, and that was like in the 1400s. And all of a sudden they start shipping around the world. They go around the world. Sometimes they kill people. That's true. They did some horrible things in competition, but they also collaborated. And for instance, sugar and tea was never
Mm-hmm.
mixed together before until, and it was a Portuguese aristocrat married King Charles of England, and she likes this. She takes sugar from the Americas, tea that they were getting from China, and it went viral like in weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And the East India tea companies open up and they start doing these shipping. And Szechuan Chinese, my wife's Chinese. If you like Szechuan, that never happened before that time. So collaboration allows us to mix and get the best. We get music, we get all kinds. We're going to a renaissance of art and culture. Um, but you can't do it if there isn't enough to go around. But it looks like there is. And so the
Yeah.
problem is that there's too many people still operating, or politicians still operating from that scarcity mindset. That like we got to, it's either us or them, and you're like, no, it's actually all of us. Don't, and the ISC square, we look for the common good, and I like to say that, and we're so aligned with the ISO. And what is the ISO? It means that we
Yeah.
treat each other equal. It comes from the Greek. It's not a word for international state. I mean, it was cutely chosen, but they chose it from the word, a Greek word that means equal, from Afghanistan to Zimbabwe. And so I think that's what, to me, when I try to coach people, it's like, look, we have the resources now to provide. Every man, woman, and child can live like a king if it's managed right. If we don't have we get to be trillionaires and you poor people can starve. I
Yeah,
do
but
believe in some people can get paid more or whatever, but nobody should starve.
I agree, and I absolutely love that. When I started talking about abundance and the fact that we can collaborate instead of compete, people looked at me as if I was crazy. Why are you working with this one? He's also an instructor. He'll take all of your clients. No, there are more than enough trainees who wants to be trained. Some of them will prefer to be trained by me. Some of them will prefer to be trained by you. And if I don't refer, and even, you know what? I actually referred so many students to another instructor because I knew that his training was more suitable for them,
You,
and vice versa. He's been referring people to me for years.
You
So
know, I even noticed it a lot with these younger group of kids because I came up with Sean Harris and Clement and all those
yeah,
people, and they were always good. Clement was always wonderful.
yeah,
Luke Ahmed, I don't mean to call him out by this but Luke, you're a wonderful guy, and he's
he is.
always doing that. He's always promoting other instructors, and I think
He
that's great.
is. He's wonderful. Look, it's wonderful, and I think, to be honest, they are so. And it's not just how you teach; is people want to learn from different people. People will relate to
Sure,
different teaching
sure,
techniques.
yeah,
Like I've been saying for
yeah.
years, if you don't get the way I instruct cryptography and you read Sean Harris's book and you still don't get cryptography, I'm sorry. That's the best I can do. These are like my best teaching mechanism to teach cryptography. You should probably ask someone else because
And
that's
you
what we
see
have.
it. I see it in martial arts. There are some martial arts thinking that you should just go to one teacher. There's some teachers say you just study with me, and that was popular in the old days.
Yeah, it was.
We don't do that in our school. If you're going to go there, then you can't come here. But that's so changed since the mixed martial arts thing. Now it's like you only study one style. At least pick a striking and a ground fighting game. And my coaches, I've been with the same coach for 40 years, but he's always like that. And it's funny. I was just saying to him, I watched a lady who I love on YouTube, a Tai Chi martial arts expert, and she corrected something in a move. I was like, oh my God, I've been doing that wrong all these years. And it's not like my teacher did it wrong. It's that I just didn't
Yeah.
absorb it when he tried to show it to me. And because then I went back and watched him, I'm like, oh, he is doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes you have to just change the way you look at things or who you talk to. And that's why, by the way, that's one of the reasons that I do these podcasts, because I talk to so many different people and learn so much from so
Sure.
many different people and getting their perspective. I think that obviously it helps me as a professional, it helps me personally. And I think hopefully it helps people listening to us, hearing different perspective. I absolutely love that. And you started mentioning the fact that you've been teaching for a very long time. So let's talk a little bit about your work, about InterNetwork Defense, which is your company. You've been doing it for quite some time. Can you tell us a little bit about your work, what you do, a little bit about how you got to education and training?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I started teaching. I took the CISSP in 2001, and I just, well, actually, it was a little bit earlier because my coach, my martial arts coach, who's also he's an infosec guy. He's a great pen tester. He's the first guy to pass the license CPEN test from EC Council. And we had talked about this idea of cyber kung fu. In fact, what really started was a book by Alvin Toffler. You remember he wrote Future
No.
Shock and the Third Wave?
Yeah.
Yeah, yes. And so he wrote a
Okay.
book called War and Anti-War. And I believe it came out in '93, and it changed my perspective. And at that time, he said, "What we view as that industrial age version of a soldier with a rifle over his back is going to change to a network admin sitting behind a keyboard." And I think we've seen it now this year. But he was saying
Absolutely.
this in '93. And so, we just came up. I think it was my idea, but we're not even sure. I said cyber kung fu, and so we started this cyber kung fu, we call it. And he's more hands on. And I did the CS, and I registered the domain name. I think actually a year earlier, InterNetwork Defense. And then another IBM person, my wife, decided to help me put the company together, and so we put this company together, and I got the CISP, and then I got she got me a gig actually to teach, and it was for a government agency out in Lansing, Michigan, and it turned out I was following up on Sean Harris was supposed to teach that class and had an issue and needed to back out. Sean asked how did that go, and they said it was great. She called me up. I'm watching an Eagles game, and on my phone, I was like, look, Sean Harris. And it went great. She hired me to do some contracting work for her, and then it's just been a
That's
great ride ever
amazing.
since. Yeah. So I got
So
to
how
work
long
with
have
her
you been
too.
teaching? It's
I,
been a
I
while.
started teaching NT351 in '97. I think that was my first class, 351 workstation, then server. And then I went to Cisco class. I did in 99 or whatever, started doing CCNA. CISSP, my first class was, I believe, September of 2001. So.
Amazing. Do you still like it?
I love it. I love it. It's my flagship course. I teach a few courses. They're all ISO accredited courses. So I did the CCSP and the ISACA 3. But the CISSP just is so comprehensive that I get to, like, on the one hand, I get to make people understand at a deeper level because I'm still a packet analyst guy, and I just like to show them. But I also get to learn constantly from brilliant people. I get students that are in my class that really, way ahead in the field, but they have to pass their exam.
Yeah.
And I have a little edge on that and can share it. So it's so wonderful. I get to the smartest people, and it's just a great topic, a series of topics.
Absolutely. I agree. I absolutely love teaching CISSP. I've been doing it for 10 years now. And every time I say, no, I don't have time. After about 3 months, I get that itch. I need to teach. You either love it or hate it. I don't think there's like a middle ground there. But you mentioned certification, and you mentioned CISSP and CISM, and I know you've been teaching a lot of certifications.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that people that have sometimes the experience but haven't passed the exam. So how important do you believe certifications in general are in today's cybersecurity field?
It's probably mixed, because I know people who can do well without it, but I personally have a kind of like your peer review thing, where you were talking about if something's been around longer, and the encyclopedias people did, that it's kind of like driving a car. Does having a driver's license mean he's a good driver? Does not having a driver's license mean they're not? But do you want to have a world where you're not supposed to have a driver's license? I prefer people have a license. Actually, I want the car to be certified. I want the driver to be certified. And it doesn't mean that the car is not trustworthy. But if it's not certified, I don't know. I don't feel right. So maybe it's one of those things, like if you're collaborating internally, I don't care. But if it's between organizations, yeah. It reminds me of OAuth. I like to say, if you're using OAuth and you're just going to authenticate, between APIs in your company, pre-shared key is fine. But if you're doing OAuth between two different companies, I want OpenID.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that analogy, actually. I'm going to use it. I'm going to steal it. Yeah, you know what? But I do see so many changes in this industry. I can tell you personally, from a personal perspective, I think that CISSP changed my life. Not because of what I learned, because I can't say that I learned so many new things, but it did sort of put things in the right context. And also, I have to say, for me personally, it was an external validation of she actually knows what she's talking about. So you have, maybe that's my imposter syndrome, thinking it's ugly ahead, but yeah. But for me,
it
that
reminds you, yes, it's like a first black belt. I always felt I could fight. I don't. Do you have to have a black belt to be able to fight? Does everybody who has a black belt? I know people with black belts can't fight. But when I got that first black belt, I did feel like it was a validation. I'll admit, I thought, there you go, you proved it to some other people too.
It's sort of funny, but yeah, it does prove. And it's also sort of your foot in the door. You have to, when I recruit a new employee, I have to put some sort of benchmark. I need to know what they know coming in. It doesn't mean that they'll pass the interview, but at least they have the credentials that I know that they're supposed to know specific things. I want to go back to AI and the fast development of AI, because I think it will lead to interesting things. And I want to hear from your perspective, how do you see AI change the cybersecurity landscape in the next decade? Like, do you see specific places where AI can really change the industry? Maybe it makes specific professions redundant. I don't know.
Yeah. There's a few things to unpack there, I guess. So I think AI, at both as an attacker and defender, comes in. The attackers are going to continue to use AI and more advanced attacks, but so are the defenders. And my wife is in incident management. She heads incident management for a large farm, and we got actually into a debate about me using the term SOAR, and she goes, "It's XDR. Why are you still using that old term? You sound like an old man." But some people use differences. But whatever, I see AI as being the countermeasure to AI attacks. So I really think that these AI-based automated response or extended, whatever you want to call it, detection response, are the key to defense. Now, my earlier statement about 2029, not until Doll E can spell things right, I'm not leaving my XDR or my source system unattended. So it still takes human oversight, but can it make some things redundant? Yeah, yeah. So I like to say, even with programmers, like people are using Chat GPT and stuff to do their programming coding, but you can't get rid of all the coders. No, the coding is, you have the creative genius, and then you have his team of people that do the redundant stuff. Those people can be replaced. The
But
coding genius, no, no. The
but the
creative input
question
behind.
is, but you know what? That's what I always go back to. And let's go back to cybersecurity. Let's talk tier one analysts. No, in a couple of years, I won't need tier one analysts.
Right, right,
I probably
right.
won't even need tier two analysts.
Yeah.
But I will still need incident responders. Can you become an incident responder without being a SOC analyst first? Can you be a black belt without going through white and blue? I don't know karate. I'm sorry. My kids are in judo, but I'm guessing white and green and blue and yellow and things. You can't do it. You have to go through certain steps
Some
to become a
intermediate
black belt.
steps. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But what are those steps? Like, to be a mathematician, do you have to be able to do calculations by hand, or are you allowed to use your calculator
Well, that's also a question.
now?
They
Yeah.
teach kids still to do it by hand.
I,
And
I just think they're
I,
wasting
the,
people's times.
yes,
Why?
with that I agree. But you know what? I have the worst handwriting like in the world. I can write, I can read pretty much what I'm writing, but that's why I was such an early adopter of the keyboard of a laptop.
I'm with
And
you. My
my
hand. I'm a
daughter,
lefty, and I'm a guy, so it's at least
yeah,
as bad
well,
as yours. Yeah.
my daughter is exactly the same. And to be honest, her school does allow her to do most of the work on the computer, but not 100%. It drives me insane because she has so many, like, her handwriting is not clear, and then they don't know what you wrote, so they take down. Why? Why do we?
There's a
On,
certain part, and speaking of daughters, my younger daughter had the same problem. She's 18 now, but we had the whole discussion of, why can't I use my calculator? And she had made this comment about, there are a bunch of older people, Dad, your generation or whatever, or in the middle, because I'm older than a lot of her friends' dads, that think, I had to suffer when I was a kid, and I came out okay. And she goes, those people didn't come out okay,
yeah.
Dad.
That's true. That's true.
So I don't know. There's this fit. If they didn't do it the hard way, the way we did, then it's wrong. But there are some things get lost. You mentioned you played piano, and I kept thinking, as a musician, I was so I love the older stuff, and up until we have like MP3 players, or whatever. I tell Alexa to play music, but 100 years ago, you bought sheet
Yeah,
music,
both. Yeah.
and somebody in your house was the media player. You had a piano, and they knew how to manually play that music. Now, to appreciate music, does everybody have to have a piano player in their house today? No, but that was the only
No.
way you could do it 100 years ago or so, right?
Yeah, that's true. But you know what? Let's go back to the piano. And you're also a musician, and you already mentioned martial art, but you're also a musician. I remember I had this old Russian piano teacher that made me do the scales, and I
Sure.
hated it again and again and again. And at some point, I didn't get it. And about 15 years later, when I went back to playing the piano after I didn't play who knows how long, I just sat on the piano, and the scales is something I will never ever forget. Wake me up 3 a.m., tell me to do the scale, I'll do the scales. That's fine. It's sort of muscle memory that is embedded in me. And I think that I couldn't play the piano well, at least not classical piano, without having that proper, like, fundamental training. And I am concerned when I look at cybersecurity And I look at technology in general. I look at programming. Yes, I will need those visionaries that can build, but they need to understand code. And is learning code in university enough to understand the real possibilities that are out there? I'm not sure. I don't know because I'm not a programmer, but I think that yes, there is an advantage to being a junior and doing scut work and
Oh,
only then
absolutely. There's got to, yeah,
progressing.
sure.
And a lot of that scut work is going to go away. And I'm concerned what will happen not in 5 years' time, in 15 years' time. Who will be the seniors in cybersecurity in 15 years' time? How will they get the experience that they need?
I'm one of these Kurzweil guys. If you follow the AI timeline of his, singularity is near. That 2029 is that crossover point when artificial
Yeah.
intelligence. So I really mostly have a 5-year plan. I'm not trying to go too more down to the 15. So. But I think a lot of things are going to get automated after that, and I think really the skills of the future are, what do you feel like doing? What do you feel like? And as long as it doesn't hurt other people, and you're working for the ISO, you respect the common good. Actually, one of my favorite like ISO compatible or ISC square compatible line is from Buckminster Fuller. That whatever, and he was applying it to scientists, but whatever you do should advantage all without disadvantaging any. And if you can just get that going, and in an abundance minded thing where it's not, no, it's either me or them, no, it's all of us. We can protect all of us, I think that's where we're going to go. And we're going to see a renaissance of artists and other things. I really see a huge, but the next 5 years are shaky. These next 5 years, I say, are going to get really turbulent. So it's like we're in this car that we know doesn't run right, but we have to be in it, and we're feeling it shake. And there's some people go all the way to the left and go all the way to the right. No. Let's steady the ship. Let's not go all the way one way or the other.
Yeah.
Let's just go forward and try to keep things level, because it's going to get better. But it's going to, before then, I think it's going to get exceedingly shakier, a good chance for people to make huge mistakes.
True. I think, but I agree. I think it's very exciting times. I think that, for example, I have a friend here that he's into no code and building
I'm
products with
far
no
away
code.
from that. I actually think that you'll be able to just think or say with a BC brain-computer interface, this is what we need,
Exactly. And I think I remember the first time I've ever seen Wix, the website builder, and I was like, oh my God. I still remember tag, HTML tag, and I had to remember
I was using
the numbers
Microsoft
of
Front
like,
Page.
yeah, no. I was like really writing. That's the only code I ever wrote, HTML, and I used to build websites. And like, you want to tell me that I'm just going to drag this picture and I'm going to enlarge it and it's going to be bigger? No. I don't get it. What do you mean? What do you mean? So I think that this is super exciting, and I personally, I can't wait to see where this is going. And I want to ask you, from your perspective, can you give me an example of a specific AI solution, not necessarily in cybersecurity, but maybe specifically in cybersecurity, that you're really excited about, that will change how we do things?
It's so not related or necessarily.
No, whatever you prefer.
My favorite work is being done with animals. There's two people especially who I focus on. It's Kate Darling, who wrote The New Breed. She's a roboticist, and she talks about what we could learn from how we domesticated animals to as we domesticate AIs and robots. And it's amazing. It's sometimes funny stuff. We've been domesticating not just dogs and cats and oxen. Like some of the first autonomous vehicle lawsuits are the earliest writings. The earliest writings from like 5,000 years ago are things like, we stored the grain here, we got it from there. Bob's ox went out of control and killed this guy, and now there's a lawsuit. There was a lot of ox gorging over the year, and then the other one though is Asa Raskin. Asa Raskin has been using AI to decrypt animal conversations, and he does it with like a graph that just looks at tones and figures out what things are probably saying by comparing other patterns. He's done it with monkeys and all kinds of mammals, but some of the most amazing is whales. Whales don't have, like a cat and a dog will develop, I'm a hungry bark or whatever.
Mhm.
Whales have a consistent language that they've used for, they think, 40 million years at least. So all beluga whales and all sperm whales speak the same language, and beluga whales are like trilingual. They know how to talk to dolphins, and they also, and it goes around the globe because they said, and it's just amazing what we could learn about the ocean, and other about the entire ecosphere, about other from other animals. I love that he uses also the telescope as an analogy. He said when Galileo looked through the telescope, he discovered that we're not the center of the universe, and as we use AI to look through the animal kingdom, we're going to find out we're not necessarily the center of the Earth's ecosystem either. We're one of 300 million possible different species of animal or plant or mycelium, whatever. And so I think, as a wire shark guy, this is my invention. I want to tap in, I want a Wireshark interface for the mycelium networks because they use trees and stuff, talk to each other over the
Mm.
mycelium networks. And when I fed that into Bard or whatever, Gemini and ChatGPT, they were like, dude, that could even help us detect, like forest fires before they happen. That's a great idea.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
There's so many things. Amazing. Amazing. I think that one of the things that I noticed throughout this conversation is the fact that you mentioned a few other interests that you have, a few hobbies. You mentioned music and you mentioned martial arts. And I want to ask you how these interests or hobbies or whatever you call them complement your work in cybersecurity and maybe even impact your future vision, the way you look at things.
I think especially with the self-defense, the martial arts stuff, that most of my work, especially when I was teaching live online, live on site, has been for the military. I've done a lot of private sector stuff as well, banks and stuff, but it's so many military. And I think my view when I've been bases all over the world, um, line up with their view. I get to hang out with people, very brilliant, military planners, and our views of defense. It really helps synchronize what basically the art of wars, the type of thing. Um, and in fact, everyone quotes that famous, with the art of war thing, where you got to know yourself, you got to know the enemy. Obviously, knowledge is a lot. One of my favorite thing in there is the ethics that rarely get quoted. In the art of war, the very first thing you're supposed to ask yourself before engaging in a war is who's morally right,
Hmm.
because he says
The
no general can lead an army effectively if the war itself is unjust. And then he said, and you can tell at the end of a year if the generals have to ask for more money. But
okay.
all right, so anyway,
Did you know
because then they
history
didn't
is
win.
written by the victors?
That was one
So
of my mom's favorite lines. My mom used to say,
yeah,
"You want to learn from history, Larry. Remember, it's only his, not hers, and
exactly,
it's rewritten by the winner of the last war." That
exactly.
was a basic guideline from mom. Well, in the art of war, you first ask yourself who's morally right, and if that you go, well, I'm right. Try to talk to him. That's number two. And you try to talk to him, and it doesn't work. And number three, you get a trusted third party. Can they talk to him? Yeah. And number four, you engage them in the battlefield, and that's the last thing you want to do. Number five, you invade their walled city, and now you start killing civilians. And now you compromise your first thing, and it gets sticky. It gets very sticky after that.
Absolutely.
So that's and why you always want to avoid it. And if there's enough to go around, we hope that so why are we fighting? Why are you doing this? So and I don't mean to pick on a name, but let's say that some whatever I'll say Kim Jong Il. I'll just make it easy. Has a scarcity mindset.
Yeah,
And let's face it, there are people starving over there. But if we all work together, that's not. If more people are dying of obesity than starvation, we shouldn't have people starving.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I love that perspective. I think that in theory, a lot of things that should work in theory don't always work in practice. Unfortunately, we see it every single day throughout history. It's nothing
Well,
new. But yes, it is what it is. I
Yeah, well,
guess.
there's something about losing the battle but winning the war. And I am so hopeful that AI is coming up as I just wrote a blog post called "You and What Army." Now, my mother always taught me when I was a kid to be nice to people, to respect people. But she also taught me to stand up to people. She said, "Don't- a bully would respect you more." So she always she was Irish and she loved Errol Flynn movies, and I grew up watching Robin Hood and Captain Blood was probably the most influential, and he was a pirate, yeah. And I tried to take it's like when people would challenge me, I'd be like, I don't, dude, I disagree with you. 2 plus 2 is not 5. And if you're going to act like you're going to punch me in the face until I say it is, well, then go ahead, take that shot and see how it works out for you. And I've lucked out. I always was won those fights growing up. I always hear you're going to get your ass, you're going to get killed. Well, I'm 62 and it hasn't happened yet.
Let's
And
hope it
so
doesn't.
I feel the same way about AI. I feel an ally's coming up right now that's going to have my back. And I feel like I don't care Putin or whatever. You got all these AI, assisted robots and bots and drones. But the biggest thing in security is who. The first step in any development life cycle is who. And if you get that wrong, if I can convince your drones that they work for me, that I'm the admin, it doesn't really matter. And I
Sure.
got a feeling AI is going to take over. If humans can find vulnerabilities every day, what do you think an intelligence twice as smart as a human? 16,
I guess billion.
65,000 times smarter. Yeah. So they're going to find these vulnerabilities. They're going to take over every military system. And eventually we're going to have to just bow down to, or whatever, work along with a super AGI that says, look, you humans, I know you think what's good for you is good for you, but you're not always good at it. That's why you people are overweight, because you're eating wrong. I love it when people say the AIs don't align with your values. I was like, your values suck. Do you understand that you're not exercising, you're eating crappy food? No,
Yeah,
let the AI decide what you should be eating. You know,
absolutely. You
They'll
know
make
what?
it
So,
delicious.
yeah, before we wrap this out, I want to ask you what piece of advice you would give someone just starting out in this field in cybersecurity. What piece of advice would you give them in light of everything we just discussed?
Um, get into these LLMs. Don't just, I triangulate. So I use at least in every class, ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude. There are 3 lines of defense, I call them, and start learning to talk to them. So I say the future belongs to the guys. Like people are afraid of AI. It's like, I don't, they're listening to you. Your Alexa is listening to me. I was like, I want them to listen. The biggest fear is that they didn't know about me and step on me. I'd much rather that they go, wait a minute, what would Larry think about this? He's got some strong opinions. So you start talking. My advice to everybody, get chatting with these guys. Let them know how you feel about stuff. Let them know every paperclip scenario that you're worried about in the future, and make sure you don't do this. And they go, oh, I'll keep a note out for that.
But please don't share your confidential information with them.
Can I end it with that? There's a difference between people, and I love Peter Diamandis, a great abundance minded guy, one of my great, I think one of the greatest guys writing today. But he's always saying privacy is dead. And I'm like, no, your blockchain world won't work that way. Privacy is what you keep personal. And, I learned in 6th grade that your brain does not store everything because it's not useful. When you have a toothache, there's no reason to store that. You can
Yeah.
remember that you had a toothache. So there are certain things that are not important. People, privacy is dead. And I go, oh, yeah, walk down the street naked. See how that goes for you. We are required to keep things private. It's part of being nice to society. Close the door in the bathroom. And I think just like your private key. So there are certain things I think the AIs are going to understand that that's private. I don't need to know that. I don't need that, or nobody else
Yeah.
needs to know that. It's a need to know.
Hopefully, hopefully. Okay, well, Larry, it was amazing,
Oh,
and as
thank you so
always,
much.
we always wrap this out with a few quick pop quiz sort of questions. First thing that comes to mind. So, number one, what's the last book that you read that had nothing to do with cybersecurity, but enriched you on a personal level?
The Dawn of Everything, and I forget the authors. It's a
One of
really long.
everything.
When I say read, I meant I listened to like 26 hours of it on Audible, but it is wonderful. And I actually alluded to it earlier when I said history is not as trustworthy as archaeology. So it's an amazing book on that. And without even saying it, they're kind of showing Like for instance, people just can't get along together for some. On the island of Crete, they believe the Minoan society went 2,700 years in a decentralized a society that was very kind. There were women had equal rights with men. There was no permanent prisons. 2,700 years. We obviously can do it if there's enough to go around. And they find other cultures that did it. The Hopewell Indians went well over 400 years without any sign of that. They had no police force. They said they would basically have a rule. The three things of their culture. You have the chief is the chief because you consider him wise. He makes sense to you. When he no longer makes sense, you have the right to argue. That's your first right. If you can't work it out, you disagree with everybody, you have the right to leave. And the third right, you have your right to start your own little chief and start it over again. And I think we're moving to that. Abundance allows that. Scarcity does not.
Nice. Is there, especially from a musician, that will be interesting. Do you have a specific song or band or genre of music that gets you in the zone? In the cyber zone?
Lately, it's mostly the American classics. And while I love Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers movies and the whole thing, as I was preparing, we have an album coming out. And I was really Ella Fitzgerald's a translation of those. So she does, especially the Gershwin tunes.
Yes.
She's amazing. Yeah. Our Love Is Here to Stay might be my favorite.
That's my cooking. That puts me in the cooking zone.
When I cook,
I listen to jazz and Gershwin. Yeah. That's my Friday afternoon, making Friday night dinner. That's the zone. Cool. Can you give us a piece of outdated cybersecurity advice that you really think should be retired by now?
That should be retired?
Yeah.
Oh, probably what's happening this week. I don't know if you're aware. This is the AGI, the beneficial AGI summit starts tomorrow from Singularity Net, and their whole push is that an AI can't really be, to fix bias is to be decentralized and fully open. So when I started out in security, you had I don't care what it was, Novell. You created the admin account, then the admin created the valid users, and everybody was outsiders. But I think for the AI, the AGI to run the world, that one that 2029 that I'm hoping comes, it's going to have to be, as he says, fully decentralized, where there's no admin anymore. So I think centralization has to go away, or be at least hybrided into some decentralized environment. Yeah. So I think open source decentralization has got to be the answer now.
I like that. And last one, if your cybersecurity journey was a movie, what would be the title?
Captain Greenblat.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. I like that, Captain Greenblat. So, Captain Greenblat, it was an absolute pleasure having you today. It was amazing, and I hope everyone enjoys it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I hope to see everyone back on the next episode of CyberMAYnia.